Painting fur in watercolour is our focus today, so what I'm going to do is show you 5 tips and techniques on how to paint and create realistic fur. Welcome to my channel. My name is Paul Hopkinson and I'm a professional watercolour artist. And here on YouTube you find masses of videos on how to paint wildlife in watercolour. Now if you've not visited my channel before, take a good look around and let me know which videos that you found most helpful as well. So today I'm going to give you 5 more tips and techniques on learning how to paint fur in watercolour. Oh, and if you missed my first 5 tips and techniques as well, so what I'll do, I'll pop a little link down below for you so you can click on that so you can go back to that one if you want to at a later time. Okay, now I'd like you to meet Jessie, who is a working Cocker Spaniel puppy and lives here in our little village in Devon. With Jessie's fur we have some real subtle tonal differences to consider and also how to make her black fur look realistic without making it look too old. I'll also share other techniques and tips along the way, so let's get started. So my first tip would be to ensure that you can see and use your outline drawing. Now obviously with watercolour we need to ensure that we don't have an outline drawing that's too dark. This will tend to make the finished painting look a little bit like a cartoon and certainly not realistic either. The problem really is as soon as we start adding washes of colour, we can quickly cover up all those important lines to keep us on track. See, I find overpainting them can help seal them in and also preserve them, meaning that when we add further layers of washes over the top, then pencil marks should still stay put to a certain degree, so there's a good chance they'll stay there longer than just a pencil on its own. Now you really need to think carefully about those colours that we'll overlay the outline image with. As with the pencil, you don't want it standing out too much because otherwise we'll end up with a cartoon in a different way as well, wouldn't we? So for Jessie, we have 3 main colours to think about: white, black and pink. I know, pink. So for the white areas I use a very weak mix of raw umber, lamp black and also burnt umber. The black areas were lamp black and also burnt sienna. If you don't want to miss any of my future videos, hitting that little bell icon should mean that you get notified whenever I add new content to my channel. For the pink collar, I use Scarlet Lake, lamp black and burnt umber. As you work through the painting, you may find also that you need to overpaint the outline again and again because every layer that you add of colour over the top will make that outline kind of slowly disappear underneath the surface of all the layers. So every now and then just reinforce those kind of pencil marks with a little bit more colour over the top. This is particularly true actually when we work with darker colours. Now I do have a couple of videos on YouTube on different ways on drawing outline images. Okay, now if this is something that you're interested in, I'll pop a little link up on the top right hand corner for you on how to do that. So you can click on that and have a look at that one later on, okay? Secondly, here's an equipment tip for you. The process of building up kind of deep, soft looking fur can take quite a lot of time to do. And with a brush that creates kind of multiple lines, this will really speed up the process for you. Now, I'm talking about a rake, comber and also my homemade replicator brush. So now what I'm going to do, I'm going to show you a little demonstration on how to make a rake brush and show you the overall effects that you tend to get when you use one. Ideal for those, well, kind of first or second layers. Now the thing I find when you're using one of these shop bought comber brushes or rake brushes, very similar indeed, you find that the lines tend to be too symmetrical. So there's no one of here as well, so you've got all 3 different sizes there. So if I just load one of these up a minute, let's go for that one there, shall we? And let's go for a little bit of blue. There we go. So just load that one up, put some blue paint, take a little bit off, and then just put that down there so it doesn't fall off the table. And then you find that the lines work really well, not too bad. You can do quite a lot of lines in one go, as you can see here. It's a good way of not just painting grass, not bluegrass though, but also painting feathers and fur, which is what I do a lot of the time. Just steal some of the purple. So I've been playing with this idea for you in readiness. This works really well, but you can see that the lines are too, I don't know, too parallel with one another. So, and also the lines are also very too much of the same kind of thickness all the time. Yes, you can put more pressure on like that if you want to. But when you're just using a gentle hand with this, it's too much. I find that too overpowering. So what I've done, instead of using one of the shop bought ones, I've actually made one. I know it looks terrible, however, it works really, really well. So if I get some, let's get some red paint. So I call this brush, I've given it a name, I call this the replicator. All right, okay. And you see when I start working down here, look at the difference that makes. The finer lines. And I can also thicken those lines and then make them thinner again, just by gradually increasing or coming off the pressure as I go along. And because of that, working with fur or feathers in my case, which I do a lot as you know, this works really, really well. So if I just wash that brush out a minute and we get another colour, let's get something we can see. Let's get a little bit of burnt umber. I think there's a bit of burnt sienna in there as well actually, which is quite handy. And you can see with this one how the lines can be overlapped. So you've got different thicknesses for the lines that you can apply, just by a little bit more pressure, coming off the pressure, and then you can go nice and fine with that. And the beauty about this, because it's very uneven, when the brush is about to run out of paint, you find also that sometimes you get 3, maybe 4 prongs in one go. So really advantageous, it really is. And you can add the smallest of marks like so. So this is a replicator brush, which I've called it, so you can use that name if you wish. But what I'll do, I'll quickly run through how I made one of these. So if you want to make something like this, I know, okay. Use an old brush that's got a blunt end like this one here. So this one I've had for quite a while now. And the end has just gone a little bit blunt, so I can't really get any sharp points on it anymore. Now this is a size 3. And this is actually a sable brush, but again, I'm not going to be using it anymore, so I might as well make use of it this way. So all you're going to do, get a pair of pliers like so, lot. Okay, hold it over the top, and you can see I've come down probably about 4 or 5 millimeters down, something like that. Probably about 2 3/8 of an inch, and then give it a really good hard squeeze. That's all I've done there. Okay. Really good hard squeeze, bring it back, squeeze it again, bring it back, squeeze it again, and so on. And what this is basically doing is making it like a chisel brush as well. So I squeeze it from the sides now. That's what it's actually effectively doing that. So it's good fun doing this, and it just says throwing a brush in the bin. So it's worth doing this and trying it out. Okay, so now you can see with this one, it's basically like a little fluffy top on there now, isn't it? Let's get in there. So what I'll do, I'll get a block of wood, hopefully it won't move anywhere, and I will gently trim this down now. And all I'm going to do, if I just hold that like that, I'm going to lay down a block of wood and just very lightly run my kind of crafty knife over the top. It's one of those ones with the snappable blades, so you can snap these blades off a little bit. So you can see how much hair this is taking off there, look. So you just want to thin it down, give it a bit of a haircut. That's all I'm after. And then what I'll do, I'll just very lightly go over the top and just give it a quick trim. So we'll test that one out first of all and see if that one works. So let's get some colour. And we can just adjust it as we go along. And obviously different size brushes will give you a different size effect on there as well. Look how fine those lines are. Now this is a really, really fine brush for doing those fine hair details. And you can see how well that actually works, apart from that little splodge. So all down to getting used to the pressure that you're applying with the brush as well. Obviously the more pressure you apply, the thicker the line, as you know, and come off the pressure to get thinner again. And this one's probably doing about 4 or 5 prongs in one go. So you can really kind of adjust this by trimming a little bit more off the sides or something like that as you go along. And that is how I would make a rake brush. And every time I make one, each one comes out differently. As you know with that one there and that one there. This one's shorter bristles, that one's longer, but it all depends as well on the brush that you're using to make it with. Okay, if you've got short bristles to begin with, you've got to expect quite a short bristled effect. But I tell you what, I'm really pleased with that one, you know. That really works well. I think I'm going to save this one for some of my painting work I'm going to do. So that is how I would make a rake brush. You see, actually on the Jessie painting which I've done, I actually use this brush, this replicator as I call it, to lay down those initial layers of detail. And as I mentioned, do it for the first or second layer really for something like this. Because also, don't forget that the lines tend to be a little bit too parallel, okay? Now, even with my replicator, there's still a tendency for the lines to look too uniform because of that. So the fur wouldn't look too natural, would it, if you use this brush for every single layer? It can end up looking a bit like it's been combed, it's been to the barbers. So whilst it works well for covering large areas much quicker than normal, then you have to put it away every now and then for the later layers that you add, and for that I tend to like using my size 00 brush. Incidentally as well, it can also work well for those fluffy feathered layers too. That's not easy to say, is it? Fluffy feathered layers, okay. I'll pop a little card to the top right which will take you to a video about all the types of brushes that I use, which you may find useful as well. Now the third tip I'm going to offer you is give things time. I always say that you should never ever rush a painting, and this is very true. Working in layers which you want to look realistic, you have to allow time for the layers to dry. Otherwise, when you work on top, you end up with a blended muddy marks, which is not very nice. Not only that, but working in fine lines is quite tiring as well on your eyes and your hands, especially your hands. So taking regular breaks is essential, or you will become overtired and not produce your best work at the end of it, okay? Likewise, taking time away from your painting as well enables you to come back with fresh eyes and see things from a different perspective. Sometimes as well, when you really focus on fine detail like I do, it's so easy to lose sight of the bigger picture, so quite literally as well. And it isn't until you look at the whole painting that you spot things which are not quite right. See, oh, that needs tweaking and altering slightly, so that's why you should take these regular breaks. You really need to allow yourself the time as well to become absorbed in your work. It takes me a while to kind of get started with a painting, really just kind of get into it, if you know what I mean. I would suggest that if you have only like 10-20 minute slots of spare time, that isn't going to result in a piece that gels together really, not for me it wouldn't. Your paints will also keep drying and need remixing, which also then would involve more water, and then you've got to add more pigment, which may result in tonal differences and also patchy work. Allow yourself a really good block of painting time as well, so you can really become absorbed, but have the time to step away. I mean, I go and make a drink or even stretch my legs on a regular basis, so I suggest you do the same, okay? The process of painting fur is very time consuming. It is, I know it is, but it will only look realistic if you put in the time and apply all the different layers that you need to kind of create that feeling of depth and form to the fur. But if you're really strapped for time, then why don't you work on a painting in miniature? This will immediately speed up the process as there won't be nearly as much paper to cover. Even just a small reduction in the overall size of the painting will make a considerable difference to the amount of paper you've got to cover with your little brushes, okay? So make sure that if you haven't got a lot of time, try to do something that little bit smaller. Oh, and also don't forget, if you're new here, check out the description down below where I've got some free content for you to try. Now fourthly, you need to think really carefully when you're considering tonal differences when working with fur. See, unlike feathers, which are often distinct from one another, aren't they? Fur really covers, well, the whole animal, doesn't it? So the only way of kind of building up a realistic feel to fur is by working with subtle changes in tonal values. Sometimes scrunching your eyes up and looking at the reference photograph will help you see those tonal differences. A little tip as well is that you can also print off that reference photograph in black and white, or just alter the colour a little bit within it, and that in turn will show those little tonal areas better, so you'll be able to see the difference between light and dark, you know, so it's well worth doing that. A lot of spotting tonal differences comes with experience really, and really train your eyes to spot those subtle changes as well. Look at the way that the light is actually hitting the animal. I mean, not literally kind of hitting it, but you know what I mean. This will naturally create the light and the dark areas that's within the fur, giving you more shape and like a three-dimensional feel to the subject you're working on. Are you finding my little video here helpful? Can I ask you to click on the thumbs up button as a simple thank you for these free tips and techniques on painting fur. Look at where those shadows are being created, and these can be done by objects sort of casting shadows from nearby, and also the animals themselves casting shadows on other body parts, for example the chin on the neck and so on. Underneath areas will almost always be in some sort of shadow, so the tones really need to be darker in these places. Use that outline drawing to guide you along the way. This is another reason as well why preserving it for as long as possible is important. The outline drawing may have already highlighted the edge of one tone and the start of another. With black and white fur really, it's finding those changes in tone that can be even more difficult. So if you're just starting out with watercolour, go for another coloured animal, okay? Now if you can practice creating fur with easy colours to work with, will make it that bit easier when you're working on black or white fur. I've got a few videos that focus on black and white fur, so tell you what, I'll link them in a card above for you. So if you're really interested in learning more on the subject, you can take a look later on. Now my final tip for today is specifically working with washes over the top of detail. Now guess what, I finally crossed that magic 10,000 subscriber mark here on YouTube. And it's all thanks to people like yourselves who've clicked on like, they've hit the bell, chosen also to subscribe and left me a comment. Can I just say a big thank you to you for the support you've given me. And please keep doing this as well because it really helps everything that I do. And an even bigger thank you for everyone that shares my videos. And it's also really easy to do as well. You just simply click on the arrow below the video and choose where you want to share them. Now this really gives my channel a big boost, and in turn helps me teach even more budding artists like you. Now I used this technique with Jessie as I knew she was a very young dog. I didn't want the highlights within her black fur to look like grey hairs and kind of make her look too old. You'll need to create those highlights and a change in the tone as well to give form to the animal. But overlaying and tinting back those highlights so that the difference in the colour to the rest of the fur is reduced will really help. Being able to apply a wash over detail requires time as the details need to be dry. Okay, remember that, you've got to be dry first. You are in effect actually glazing, and this will simply muddy all those layers if they're still wet. The wash also needs to be applied very lightly, alright? So you need to barely touch that paper, so keep that pressure to a minimum. I also find as well that the less passes of the brush you make, the better. The more you work back and forth over the same area with paint, and the more likely you are to muddy the colours as well, so be careful with that. So make sure you have the right mix and be brave and bold when you apply it. If you still want it to be a bit brighter or darker, just simply wait for everything to dry first, okay, and then repeat that same process. This will build the layers and deepen, darken and brighten the tone. Now which of these tips and techniques would you be using when you paint fur in watercolour from now on? Let me know in the comments down below. Now if you're interested in painting the whole tutorial on painting Jessie, our delightful Cocker Spaniel puppy, it's on my website and on Patreon and is about 5 hours long. But staying here on YouTube, I'll see you in my next video to my right, and that's on how to paint dogs in watercolour, okay? I'll see you there.